Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey there, and welcome back to, or if it's your first time, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for coming along on the journey of this show that we designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society, it is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. Hey, my name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show with Craig Brown. Craig is an industry veteran and a former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, how are you today?
I'm good, Tom. Anxious to chat a little bit more about how you make exchanges work. We'll explain in a moment.
Nice. Well, every week we try to bring this type of interesting information to this podcast, and we interview people who have ideas that are going to help all of our listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today I'm happy to welcome to the show Mark Driscoll. He is the Senior Director of Enterprise Sales at AMC Bridge. Hey, Mark, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Craig. It's great to be here.
Hey, we're glad to have you. Now, I don't really read people's bios. You know, before we do these shows, I always get like the biographies of people and sort of their resume. I like to have people kind of share their own personal journey. So, Mark, what's sort of your background and how did you get into being the Director of Sales at AMC Bridge?
Well, it started a long time ago. I started as a draftsman more than 35 years ago. And I was really privileged to be among the very first users of this brand new kind of computer-aided drafting program called AutoCAD. So I've been around for a little while. And that was a fateful thing because that set me on a path and I've never looked back. I became a mechanical design engineer and worked for a few companies designing product. I even taught CAD both at high school level and college level for a number of years. And then I had the incredible opportunity to join SolidWorks. And this was the late 90s, a really fun time to be at SolidWorks. And I ran their certification program and eventually helped build their really successful OEM program. Since then, I've worked for other industry leaders like Keytech PLM, 3D Connection, and TechSoft 3D. And now I'm delighted to be with AMC Bridge for the past year, developing business for them in the enterprise marketplace.
So Mark, it's good to hear your voice again. You and I ran into each other the last year or so at a couple different conferences. And you're aware that the Digital Enterprise Society is the evolution of PLM world, at least the users of it. And so I was curious when you and I chatted about you're joining AMC Bridge, the focus on helping companies in their digital enterprise. Can you summarize that a bit are we just talking about a file exchange or are we talking about other things?
Oh, no, we're talking about a whole ecosystem of data requirements and data usage that's just fundamentally different than what we envisioned those 30 some odd years ago. So AMC, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, I'm just curious, what causes it to be different? Is it we need more than drafting tools, or is it technologies making other things possible that weren't possible before?
Well, I think one of the interesting things is that back in those early days, we had, back in the 90s, let's say, when I was at SolidWorks, we were spending a lot of time focused on converting folks from 2D platforms to 3D platforms with the vision that solid model would become kind of the center of the manufacturing processes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me tell you, at least I, for one, had just a limited imagination with respect to how that would just explode. The number of upstream and downstream processes and functions that need access to that data, to that model, that rely on the information related to the model that might not actually be engineering related, is just massive.
Yeah.
And the explosion in the amount of data has created a situation where people really have unique data challenges that they have to overcome in order to be able to use the whole gamut of engineering data in their system.
So I've long, and I'm an engineer by training, and I'm older than you are, so I had to learn to draft because that's the only way I got an airfoil. But in any case, yeah, once you have a picture of a system, putting information in the context of the picture is much more powerful than a list of information in a piece of paper, right? And so I think maybe that's what people didn't expect was, oh, now that I can hang this information on a picture, there's all kinds of things I can do, like you were listing. Now, it's also interesting to me that once you get into mass production, you'd actually like to put in constraints. Only do pictures like this, or only bend your metal a certain way. And what's interesting to me is, well, where do you associate that in your ecosystem? You can't do it to the design because you haven't made the design of the part yet, right? So you have to organize it some other way. Are there other examples like that are the kinds of information wanting to be managed or before you actually have the part design?
Absolutely. So over the past 20 years, AMC Bridge has been working with predominantly software companies like Dassault Systems and Autodesk and whatnot to help them enrich their software applications. But more and more, we're being pulled into the realm of the enterprise user. Mm-hmm. And, as I mentioned, for decades, our industry has been trying to develop and kind of promote ways to leverage that engineering data and make all the processes have access to it and leverage that in a way that's more efficient and makes sense for their business. But what we've discovered is that there are kind of three pillars, if you will, or three areas of the digital enterprise where we offer a very unique perspective and solution. Those three are data availability and management, domain expertise automation. That's something that a lot of folks don't think of when they consider the digital enterprise. And then, of course, the application of advanced technology solutions. There's a lot of new technology being introduced all the time, from the use of AR, VR, and generative design and scanning and things of that nature.
So I like that you mentioned those three pillars. The data availability, people, I think, just assume, especially in our Google world that we all live in now, that you can just find it. But the trouble is it's not indexed or it's not contextual, right? And so it's available, but how do you make sure it's relevant to the design you have? And then your point about domain expertise, I suspect that's related. Can you elaborate on domain expertise? Give us an example of what you mean.
Sure. Domain expertise sort of fits in kind of two categories. Every company relies on the application of the skills of their employees. And those skills obviously develop over time. And in most companies, there's one or two of those, let's call them politely, legacy employees who have a repository of data in their mind. They know all of the processes and products and ways to build their products and systems as efficiently as possible. And so,
like that manufacturing example I was bringing up, where you know what your capabilities are and how fast you can run your line. The last thing you need is engineering coming up with a product that slows the line down, right?
Exactly. And so in cases like that, we've helped our clients leverage that domain expertise to get that knowledge in an automation routine or two that helps them train their newer employees, the folks coming into their company, capture that information that's so critical to the success of their organization, and make it so that it's protected and it doesn't retire off or disappear into the sunset somehow. But there are two aspects of domain expertise automation that are important. So one is sort of that human element. The other is the product element. In some cases, the domain expertise and all the intelligence for that product are built into the product. You've seen a lot of new products on the market that require kind of product configurators to figure out which one you want. Well, that concept is kind of predicated on the idea that the product itself is the domain expertise, and there's a lot of knowledge and intelligence in it. And so we've helped some of our clients actually build systems whereby they're able to help their clients identify the right system, the right product that they want, and get access to that information much quicker. In essence, that helps them kind of speeds up their sales process somehow.
Right, exactly, because you're building what customers want, even if maybe they surprise you now and then and ask for something you didn't expect, right? So you're on to a really important point here. You know, a lot of times people come into our industry of computer-aided everything, and they think, well, there must be one solution that just does it all. But the way you described being aware of what your expertise is, what your domain is, if you will, what your competitive advantage is, it's not surprising then that there's really no single solution. You know, how do you help maybe a products company that's middle-sized, you know, maybe upwards of $1 billion a year or a few hundred million, make them realize, nope, despite all those commercials from the tool vendors, there really isn't one solution for everything. How does that discussion go?
You know, I've spent a lot of times, you mentioned the PLM shows that we've both been at, and I've been in a lot of discussions with companies looking for that silver bullet. They're traveling the trade show floor looking for that one vendor who can do it all. And
well, that's because they say they can. You know, this is my little quip with those guys, but never mind. But yeah, so how do you teach them? How do you make them aware that's really not the way it works?
Well, you know, in many cases, we don't have to teach them because they discovered very quickly on their own.
Okay, and then you just help pick up the
Right.
pieces. Okay.
They find out that this particular application that they're using doesn't talk to that particular system that this company wants to promote, or that guy down the hall has information in his head that we need to get out, or that specialist has a laptop full of data, and they realize that, you know, all of these data silos created either by divisions or by function or by competence need to be addressed, and those need to be addressed typically in those three pillars that I mentioned. I think that data availability and management is probably the most important to the digital enterprise.
Yeah, and I think this monolithic one solution is one of the misunderstandings. And so one of the industries that we serve is the aerospace industry, and one of the specific questions they had was about CAD interchanges, and it's not so much they want to use multiple CAD tools, it's that, you know, like where I came from, the car business, they have very complicated supply chains, and a lot of their tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers will not be in the same even drafting tools or CAD tools or PDM and PLM tools. And so what's your advice? What's your thoughts about how do you make that work across your supply chain, the exchanges of key information?
That's a really interesting question. We've engaged pretty recently with a number of clients who compound that challenge one degree further.
Okay.
Within the same organization, you know, there are companies that use one application for CAD and another application for CAM. For instance, maybe it's CATIA for design and MX CAM for manufacturing.
And do they have a real good reason for that? No. Okay.
I would assume they do, but the reality is it's probably a legacy situation where
so they don't have the okay. This is good. This means they don't have the courage to change. You see, when you retire, you can throw rocks like this. I'm just joking. But yeah, to your point, maybe it's legacy. It's the way it is. It's the way it's evolved. So
not only that, but it's the evolution part of that's the key, I think, because when you're building systems and you're trying to automate them and you're trying to make them more efficient,
right,
you almost, in a sense, you're tying an anchor around yourself, saying that this is how we will operate for the future. And so when somebody comes along and says, "Hey, guess what? We're going to start using this data format," you kind of have to sit back and say, well, all right, how am I going to fit that round peg in this square hole?
Yeah.
And so in some cases, you know, there are off-the-shelf products that translate one file format to another. But in systems like this, especially with enterprise accounts, those off-the-shelf systems very, very often require a lot of manual post-processing. You get the data, but then now you have to massage it to be exactly right, and you have to make sure the metadata is correct, and so there's a lot of extra work.
Well, and it sounds like language translation, and a lot of languages are structured differently. So the same is probably true here, that the exchanges are structured differently. So yeah, dealing with misunderstandings, we'll call it that, is
Exactly.
probably one of the key arts, right, to figure out how to do that.
Exactly. And as we talked about earlier, automating your domain expertise, the language analogy is really great, Craig, because not only is there structure differences, within the same language, there can often be nuanced differences. A phrase in New England is going to mean something very different than it might mean in Southern California.
Or even the Midwest, or even Texas, so Tom's involved.
That's right, y'all.
Let's just state, for the record, that wicked is good.
Wicked. Yeah. Okay.
Now,
So
the
that's
same thing exists
interesting.
in the data, right? So you've got domain expertise, nuanced knowledge applied to that manufacturing system that has to take the data that it just received from the design system and make it work correctly. So here's where a company like AMC Bridge comes in, and we can help our clients automate the access to that information, automate that domain expertise, so that they're getting the right information in the format they can use faster than all of the manual post-processing and interpretation that would be required otherwise.
So I think you answered the point, but I want to emphasize it for people. So automation means getting rid of the transport, the movement of data, and the manual operations. It just means let the human focus on the knowledge part of it, the decision part of it, not on the movement part. Is that right?
Yes, and in some cases,
And more. Okay, keep going.
In some cases, we can even automate some of that human part if we get enough information from our clients. For instance, if they say, "Look, these types of data need to be in this format so they can fit into this bucket," we can help them make those adjustments from one data format to the other. And so it gives them the ability to apply their higher level skills and their real value add to their process. And it just makes the entire system that much more efficient. I like where you were going with that. Let them focus on the knowledge, the value add.
So back to the challenge we got from our aerospace counterparts. Is there some key thing they should do, and maybe it's not a cookie cutter thing they buy, in order to streamline their supply chain exchanges?
You mean other than call me quickly?
Okay, well, I thought that might be the answer, but at the moment you can't visit. You can only do this on virtually, like we are, right?
Well, I think one of the things that I would advise a prospective client to do in a case like that is to understand that domain knowledge, because it's not just about data exchange.
Well, and there's two domains. There's a domain of you, the customer, what you want to fill this part of your system. But then there's the domain of the supplier. There's a reason you're using them as a supplier, probably historic success, right?
Yep.
And so you want to keep using them. Well, when a problem occurs and you both got to be there to help, you got to understand at least some amount of each other's domain. Isn't that right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Mark, I've enjoyed chatting with you. I don't know when we're going to be at a conference again. We publish these a few weeks after we record them, but as everybody knows, we're dealing with COVID-19. Has your work changed as a result of the last 6-8 weeks? And what do you think is going to happen in the next few months, maybe the rest of this year, 2020?
Oh goodness, my crystal ball came from the same place yours did. It's pretty murky at this point. I think, obviously our work has changed. We're all working from home. The good news is, being in software development, we're used to these sort of virtual environments. We're a global company and we work with clients all over the world, and so we're in webinars and technical discussions in this kind of format all the time. Yep. And since our main product is custom software development, it's easy for us to kind of complete that function remotely. But as a sales guy, my goal is to be in front of people and be engaging with people, and that's changed quite a bit. Video conferences and telephone calls are happening a lot more, and conferences themselves are non-existent. But where are we going to go?
It'd be interesting. The conference, like Realize Live, the one that Siemens does. So I just saw that's going to go a 2-day virtual event. where we'll plug in. And my comment back to them was, and I've known those guys for a long time, right? That's PLM world. I said, hey, make sure you let there be a forum like what you and I have been a part of, Mark, where we can get together and chat while the presentation's happening, right? Or while the if they're going to talk about cloud technology, which I'm sure they will, you and I could be able to chat. Well, of course, we already have mechanisms to do that, but wouldn't it be cool if it was organized in the context of the conference? I think we may have to do this for a couple of years if you take the more conservative estimates of how long it's going to take to get a vaccine. Right?
Yeah, I think you might be right. It's interesting to see that a lot of companies have adopted this idea of, the water cooler or the Friday afternoon cocktail social, and you have these Zoom meetings with bunches and bunches of your colleagues together, having a glass of wine or what have you, and chatting and about nothing in particular, just not meetings, but just getting together.
So that's a good way to transfer back to Thom. We were talking about that earlier before we started the broadcast about social connecting and physical distancing. So maybe with that, I'll send it back to Thom.
Well, yeah, thank you, Craig. I've been talking a lot about this whole world of what I call social tightening while physical distancing, right? I mean, we have to keep these relationships alive. And it's been interesting, Mark, because I've been working with some companies trying to host some of these online Zoom meetings, either for their employees, but also for their customers, being able to get people to come together and talk. So what are your thoughts for the average person who works in this world of PLM and related products? What do you think the longer this goes on without having the conferences, without people being able to attend, the different events, what impact do you think that's going to have, not only from a sales side, since you're the director of enterprise sales, but also from the engineer side?
That's a great question. So much of engineering is done in a collaborative format, and it's so wonderful to have been able to get up from our desks and go talk to that senior engineer, that guy that's done this for a few years and has some different experiences. And so, I would say to them, let's make sure that we embrace that concept still and continue to reach out. But as the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that we are in a tremendous time where there's interesting opportunities for people to innovate unlike ever before, because we're in a situation where we need to do that. And so I would say to the young engineers that are coming in and trying to deal with this crazy new environment that we're in, number one, don't forget to connect and continue to connect with those who've been down the path. But number two, don't be afraid to innovate, because at the end of the day, it's the innovative tools that move the digital enterprise forward. And I think we have some tremendous opportunities to do that now.
And Mark, I'm glad you brought that up. This week is the 50th anniversary of Apollo 13 and the challenges we had. And to all of you that only know this from history, watch that segment of the movie where they throw the box of parts on the table and you say, you got 14 hours to figure out a solution. This is all the parts they have up there. And the point is you're right. It's catastrophes like this that encourage innovation. And this is one of those moments. And we in the Digital Enterprise Society, whether it's making personal protective equipment or whether it's keeping the businesses going, just because we're going to do this virtually now for a while, I think innovation is the key. And we don't really have a fear. All we need to do is just work with each other, keep the network going.
Exactly.
Well, and that's what this podcast has been about since we started it, Craig. It's been sort of a virtual way of bringing experts to people. So if you're not listening to more podcasts like the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, that might be another thing that people can do to help tickle their brain and inspire them to take actions and to innovate.
And Thom, that reminds me, we put out a request in a previous podcast. Let's just remind everybody, we're looking for your stories on how you've coped or even innovated during this phase where we were all working from home. So please reach out to us at the Digital Enterprise Society, and Courtney and I and Thom will figure out a sequence of interviews, but we're interested in hearing not just how you're coping, but also how you innovated and we're still able to do what we do in the PLM universe.
Yep, because I'll say in the PLM universe, quoting Apollo 13, failure is not an option.
And we won't. We never do.
Hey, Mark, thanks for joining us here on the show.
Thank you, Tom. And Craig, thank you very much. It's great to hear you again and look forward to our next time meeting in person.
Well, maybe we'll check up with each other in the fall and see how we're doing. We might still be doing it this way. Who knows?
Well, we'll adapt.
We all look forward to getting together in person again someday. But in the meantime, join us every week right here on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast for more thought, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society, it is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.